Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Ask Boston Sax. I'm your host, Jack Tyler, and this is the show where we take your questions about saxophones and anything else and actually answer them. Hey Jack, what are your thoughts on saxophones that have a big bell? By having more material at the end of the horn, does that affect how the horn projects and plays? So as we mentioned in previous episodes, the saxophone is not a trombone. It's got holes, right? The sound is coming out of the tone holes that are adjacent to the ones you're sealing as you go down the saxophone. So the further away you are, the less of an effect it's going to have on the entire instrument until you get to those very lowest notes. So I suppose there is the possibility that having a bigger bell might affect the low B and the low B flat, but it's certainly not going to affect the entire saxophone as a whole. So anybody that's marketing to you saying that having a bigger bell is going to have a bigger sound, of course it's very easy to see that visually and think, oh, it's bigger, so it's going to sound bigger. It's just not really realistic when you look at it objectively. Now, of course, like anything on this program, if it makes you feel better about how you play, if it makes you think you've got a gigantic sound because you've got a gigantic bell, well then good for you. Hey Boston Sax, what are your thoughts regarding having the keys raised? I suppose for a bigger sound, or lower, I suppose for faster fingerings, and how would this affect intonation? The key heights on your saxophone are super important. A great mentor of mine once told me that changing the key heights on a saxophone is like adjusting the facing curve on a mouthpiece. You can take something that plays good and really make it great and specific for the player behind the horn. Now in general, as you raise the key heights on your saxophone across the entire instrument, and whenever we're talking about this, whether they're raised or lowered, the gradual progression should be getting more open the further it goes down your horn. So if you take a look at your saxophone right now and you see that the horn looks like this in terms of the key heights, it's definitely not playing right. It should be gradually more open as you get to the bottom of the horn. So again, the more open we go overall on the horn, this is going to reduce back pressure, right? Because you're creating a larger gap for your air to move in between the tone hole and the pad, which means less overall resistance, a higher ceiling of volume, but you're also going to have to use more air to get the horn to play because it's going to dissipate faster. Now, as you lower the keys, yes, it's going to make the keys technically a little bit faster, right, under the fingers because you're closing that gap. It's going to add a little bit more back pressure because you're forcing your air through a smaller gap, but it's also going to kind of center the tone and help bring the pitch down if your horn is playing really sharp. So these are things to experiment with, and you can even do this yourself with just a little bit of Scotch tape or painter's tape to lower the keys, putting it underneath the key feet. Or if you're feeling really ambitious, you can sand the material on the bottom of your key feet carefully. Make sure the sandpaper is not against the body of the horn by pressing the key down, putting your sandpaper underneath it, and pulling against the body in order to open the key heights. Just something that you can experiment with, but of course we recommend going to a good repair technician to have this done. Hey Jack, in episode 6, you talk about the fact that you feel that there's no difference between unfiled and filed reeds. Any updates on that? I saw the internet went a little bit nuts. Yes, it's true. I hate to break it to you, but at least from my perspective, and I think from an objective perspective, there's really no way that a filed reed versus an unfiled reed should have any difference in how they play, all other things being the same. And I touched on this in episode 6, and one thing that I forgot to mention, because apparently this is blown up on a particular saxophone online forum, is the fact that we didn't even talk about your lower lip. Again, when we're looking at where the filed cut of the reed is, it is below where the facing curve moves away from the flat plane of the table, which means that everything behind there is not vibrating, not to mention the fact that your ligature is clamping it down. So anything that's behind that facing curve is not vibrating, therefore can't affect the sound, and that's where that double cut is. The other thing I forgot to mention is where your lower lip is on the reed too. So again, let's think about this. The part of the reed that has the filed cut, that has all the magical, mystical properties, is in between ligature that's holding it down on the table and a flat part of the mouthpiece, and then your lower lip, which is also preventing anything in between there from vibrating. It's basically a clamp on either end, and that's where the filed cut is. So again, I just can't see how it would make a difference. Now, of course, if you feel that it makes a difference, that's fine. If it makes you happy, if it makes you want to play the saxophone, that is all that matters. But if we take a step back and look at the marketing, it really doesn't make any sense. That's fine.